welcome to Sinister Studies. Join me each episode as I delve into some truly sinister topics and traumatize my family. I'll be joined by one or more teenager, and from time to time, we'll have special guests. Be forewarned, our stories are seriously sinister, so listener discretion is always advised. We are here on this very snowy afternoon with Ben and Piper, who's being really needy, so in advance, she may get vocal. She never learned to behave as a child. She was separated from her mommy too young. Oh. But she would like to hear about the origins of the story, Don't Drink the Kool-Aid.
Is that true, Peppa? Would you like to hear?
So, to start, I am going to let everybody know that the definition of a cult... The definition of a cult is a small group dedicated to a person, idea, or philosophy, usually who follow a very charismatic leader who requires total control and often abuses their followers sexually, physically, financially, and isolating them from their families and or conventional society. Just so everybody knows what we're getting into. So our good friend Jim Jones was born on May 13th, 1931 in Indiana. He was oddly described as both a loner and an entertainer. So he's that weird theater kid, but at a whole nother level.
Okay.
He was hell-bent on entertaining at all costs. Yeah. So Jim Jones was the type of person who was going to entertain at all costs.
Sorry if you can hear the dog barking. Somebody was playing their music really loud outside and she can't get over that.
Jim reportedly once locked all his friends in the barn so he would have a captive audience.
Okay. Normal behavior.
So he wanted to be on stage, and you were going to watch him whether you wanted to or not. He was also oddly obsessed with religion, death, and Adolf Hitler.
Oh!
So super normal stuff.
I mean, that last one really,
He was specifically impressed that Hitler had avoided capture and ridicule by committing suicide.
I wonder where this could lead us.
His peers said that he killed animals.
Oh.
And
yeah.
he also held funerals for them. I guess, yay. Yes, killing animals is definitely a benchmark of future psychopathic behavior.
Just future serial killers.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some normal psychopaths.
Yes, like they say. Not all psychopaths are serial killers, but all serial killers are psychopaths.
Okay.
He was exceptionally smart, and he went to college to become a doctor. That was his goal.
Okay. I wouldn't want him to be my doctor.
Maybe he was killing the animals to learn their anatomy. I don't know. While he was in college, he was introduced to communism and went to Communist Party gatherings, which put him on the FBI's radar. For quite a number of years, communists were on their watch list. They probably still are.
Yeah, I mean, if they're, vocal enough about it, they're probably on the watch list. Oh, wait, when was this? When? The 40s? You said?
Yeah, the 40s. Yeah. So, Red Fever.
Yeah.
Sweeping the globe.
Ooh, the scary communist.
He did eventually decide against becoming a doctor, and instead decided to enter the ministry. He was preaching at a Methodist church and he was asked to leave because they found out he was stealing church funds. He claimed he got canned for trying to introduce integration to the church.
Like,
yes.
Okay.
So he wanted a mixed race church.
Well, that's
he
good.
said that that's why he was fired.
I mean, it's good that he'd want that, but also, I don't think so.
I mean, it's possible back then. I guess it just depends on...
Yeah, but he got fired for stealing.
It's not like he was in the deep south.
Yeah, but he got fired for stealing, right? So
Yes.
He was lying? Or maybe possibly exaggerating how much he wanted a mixed race church?
No, I think he really was into integration. He really... Let's see.
He was fabricating the events.
Probably so he could get another job as a preacher elsewhere. Because nobody wants you stealing the tithings.
I mean, if you say the reason you got fired was because you wanted a mixed church, that sounds better than I was stealing.
Yes.
Like embezzlement? Is that embezzlement?
That is embezzlement, yes.
Yeah.
Yay for your $5 word of the day.
Embezzlement. Sounds like a much funner word. I like that. It reminds me of bedazzle, like shit like that. Embezzlement.
It sounds like a fun word. I suppose in
does.
theory it could be fun, but also
Very illegal.
yeah. So after he left this church, he joined an Assembly of God church, but he left that church after they banned healing revivals. Have you seen or heard of healing revival?
No, I don't know what that is.
So, you've watched Big Fish with me. It's probably been a while.
It has been a while. Also, I did not see the whole thing.
Big tent in the middle of nowhere, filled with rows and rows and rows of people. A stage where a very charismatic preacher gets up, starts spreading the word of the Lord. They're singing, they're dancing, they're speaking in tongues, and the preacher then heals the congregation.
And he got mad because they said, no, that's not what we're going to do.
No, he was a performer, remember? He liked doing that sort of thing. So in 1955, at the ripe old age of 24 years old, he founded an interracial Pentecostal church named Wings of Deliverance. He later changed the name to the People's Temple. Pentecostal Christians are, quotes, charismatic religious movement that hold the belief that all Christians should seek a post-conversion religious experience called a baptism by the Holy Spirit. This could involve speaking in tongues, healing, and other manifestations of the Holy Spirit. And they definitely manifested in Jim Jones.
Obviously.
He had powers of clairvoyance
Obviously.
and
Naturally.
healing that just got stronger over time. They got so strong that he eventually took on the name the Prophet.
Ugh.
And
So
his
full of himself. The prophet? Shut up.
His followers were really devoted to him, though. He quickly became known as a charismatic and enthusiastic preacher. He claimed also to have powers of precognition, telepathy, and more healing.
So just like everything in the book.
He had all of the Holy Spiritness bestowed upon him.
Everything you could think of. Just, I have this, I have this.
I'm assuming there was speaking in tongues in there, too. Which was probably Latin. Because, as a preacher, I'm sure they made them learn Latin somewhere. Maybe that's just Catholics, I don't know. And I would be willing to bet that he had his very own revivals. Because he so enjoyed healing people.
Yeah.
Like I said, massive tents, rows and rows of folding chairs, raking in the cash because there's always donations. Everyone's on their feet, praising the Lord. He did actually give back to the community. He did work with the homeless, and he was named as the director of the Indianapolis Human Rights Commission.
Well, at least he's, like, doing something good.
Yes.
At least he's not just, like, I'm the super cool, powerful guy and, like, getting money from his church and stuff and then just, like, fucking off and being a dickhead about it. At least he's kind of helping people.
I mean, he had two very different sides. He wanted to actually help people, and then he wanted to help. In 1965, Jim became obsessed with the thought of nuclear war and the eventual doomsday that which would occur afterwards. So he moved his congregation to in Northern California after reading a magazine article claiming that that is the area that would be safest to live in after a nuclear fallout.
I mean, after nuclear fallout, I don't think there's any place that's truly safe to live in.
No. I'll say it again. Read on the beach. I read it at like 10. It was disturbing then. I mean, it's disturbing now, but it is about nuclear fallout.
Like, I don't even want to think about that shit. That's just, like, terrifying.
Yeah. You can't hide from the radiation. Piper's growling like a gremlin.
Oh my god. Mom, have you heard about the Chernobyl dogs? I want to pet a Chernobyl dog.
A Chernobyl dog?
Yeah, they have, like, these dogs in Chernobyl. They're, like, radioactive dogs.
And you want to pet the radioactive dogs?
I think they're safe to be around.
I mean, probably after a while, there's...
Chernobyl dogs. Also, Chernobyl... Hold up. There's also wolves in the area developing cancer, like, resistance to cancer.
Because they had their chemo already.
Yeah. I also didn't know that wolves could get cancer. Like, I guess that makes sense, because, like, dogs can get cancer.
Yeah.
I just never thought about it, really. Because, I mean, people aren't usually owning wolves. And, you know, wolves, if they get cancer, you don't usually know, because they're just out in the wild. Who's diagnosing wolf cancer?
So, in 1971, he moved his congregation again, this time to San Francisco, and he was becoming increasingly obsessed with power. He became close with a number of area politicians, and in 1975, he was appointed to head the San Francisco Housing Authority. And that is a position that you would never get if you weren't friends with important people. Think about our state's current debacle. You don't get jobs like those unless you know somebody.
Yeah. I mean, you could argue that you can't really get into politics without knowing someone in the first place, you know? Like, there's always kind of like, on a bigger scale like that, in a bigger city like that.
So, in our New England state, you can barely get a job as a custodian for a state building unless you know somebody.
Yeah, that's just kind of the nature of politics, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's all like...
But there are those cushy jobs that you stay with for 20 years, you get a pension still, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean, politics is all just like, what's your name, who do you know?
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly it.
It's just like a popularity contest, essentially.
Which is why the mafia should just retake the state again. I digress. Jim's congregation was at its peak at around 3,000 members. And like it always does, word tends to get around, especially since he was rejecting traditional Christian doctrine, which was a huge deal at the time.
Yeah.
He was reported to have taught that those who remained drugs with the opiate of religion had to be brought to enlightenment.
Those who... Wait, what?
Those who remained drugged with the opiate of religion had to be brought to enlightenment.
Okay. What the fuck does that mean?
Well, he felt that traditional Christianity had the wrong view of God, and socialism was the answer.
So does it mean, like, if you're basically, like, poisoned by the church, you need to be saved by my church, which is better and more correct because I said so?
Yes, that would be exactly what his thought process was. But this was still the 70s, so it was one thing to be a variation of a Christian. It was quite another thing to bring communism to church. We still were quite wary of the communists in the 70s.
Yeah, there's still people who are like, oh.
Yeah, the nation was still winding down from J. Edgar Hoover's Hunt for the Communist, which at that point, everybody was writing on everybody. If you didn't like somebody, you just reported him to the FBI as being a communist. And the FBI was still keeping tabs on him, just not to the same ferocity as they were in the 50s and 60s, but you gotta know what's going on.
Yeah. Especially since it's not just like he was reported as a communist, he's like actively preaching socialism, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so, you know, could be like, oh, he's indoctrinating our U.S. citizens. We gotta keep an eye on him, make sure he doesn't do anything dangerous. The fuck was that?
So he was touting what he called apostolic socialism and full integration of the church.
Oh no! Black people?
At church, yes. So
Black people in our churches? That's crazy. What an idea, really.
on top of that, to anybody who would listen, he was proclaiming his divinity.
And it's just like, stop being so full of yourself. Like, I know I already said it, but like, stop. Like, that's just like, tone your ego down a little bit. But I mean, good that he wanted, like, integrated churches. Because, you know, racism, it's bad.
Yeah. And to say that a lot of people took notice of Jim Jones at this point was an understatement. He was touting these extremist ideals, and his congregation was very faithful and very obedient. Not specifically to God, but specifically to Jim Jones.
Yeah.
And his church did face scrutiny at this point for charges of abuse, and he was investigated again for alleged misappropriation of church funds.
I mean, he already stole money from the church once, and it wasn't even his, so, like...
He's definitely going to take money from his own church.
Yeah.
He decided, once this investigation went underway, that it was time for a change. He took his whole flock, and he moved to Guyana. So he took his whole flock and moved to Guyana, which is a small country located in the northeastern part of South America. The capital is Georgetown. And for quite some time, Jim had been preparing a compound, which they called Jonestown. Yeah.
Jonestown?
Yeah.
Like, stop, like, dude's just, like, sucking his own dick at this point. Like,
I can't. Oh my God.
Like, get over yourself. The ego of this guy.
You have to have an ego. First, he's entering into politics.
Yeah.
He's a revival preacher. You have to have a big personality for that.
Also, like, he's a man, and men just have the audacity sometimes.
Sometimes you just need the audacity and to get you through.
Tablecloth is coming this way.
He picked his location well because the Guyanese government had no intent in getting involved in this small, self-contained, and self-governing community of American outcasts that, for all intents and purposes, weren't causing them any issues.
Yeah, they're just like, whatever, let them stay.
He had, like I said, been preparing this commune for quite some time, and his goal was to make it entirely self-sufficient. When he started being investigated for misappropriation of funds, they weren't close to being ready for the congregation. In fact, the original plan was to move them a few hundred congregants at a time.
So they could, like, slowly build the community up?
Yes.
Were they just not prepared for, like, the volume of people at that point?
No. Realistically speaking, the commune, as it wasn't completely finished, and realistically at that point could not hold more than 200 people. But Jones and his ego intact would not be deterred, and he would move over 900 people to Jonestown, which resulted in basically slave labor of his followers for months to try to make the compound livable.
Oh.
Back in the U.S., the families of the members of Jim's group were trying to get the government to investigate.
Well, yeah.
They were seeing through his bullshit, and something needed to be done. They were in Guyana at the time, so our options were pretty limited.
Yeah, because what can the U.S. government do about something that's not happening in their country?
Yeah.
Not under their jurisdiction whatsoever.
They were rightfully concerned for their family members. Members, as we will see with cults in general, their members were torn down so that Jim Jones could ensure their obedience. They were routinely threatened, humiliated, beaten, and most definitely they were brainwashed.
Yeah.
Most endured physical and psychological abuse as well as probable sexual abuse.
Yeah. And it's also the threat of, like, leaving. What will happen to you? Like, how they could treat you socially, the consequences of that, what they could be. Like, yeah, so
members of the commune were also signing over all of their assets to Jones.
Oh, God.
And to his church at a staggering rate. We're talking about houses, savings account, any sort of property was being just voluntarily handed over.
Voluntarily is definitely not,
but
like,
they were signing it over to him.
Yeah, like, they weren't just because they thought that was the right thing to do, especially since this guy had so much power over them, like, as their leader and also as a religious figure.
As a prophet.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. If God came down and was like, give me your house, I'm sure a lot of people would be like, sure, sign it over. And also, they were being heavily manipulated and figured probably wouldn't be there anyway since they're in Guyana.
Yes. Yep. Their passports were being confiscated, so they couldn't leave even if they wanted to.
Oh.
And the minority members were told that if they defected, that the U.S. government was going to swoop in and put them all into concentration camps. So, yeah, the minority members were told that they would be sent to concentration camps.
Like, what do you mean minorities? Like racial minorities, religious minorities?
Specifically, the black congregation. He was specifically targeting the black congregation.
That's fucked, man. And you know, they probably don't know what's going on in the United States.
No, they were completely cut off.
So it's like, for all they knew, there could be a concentration camp just waiting for them.
Yeah, because he wouldn't allow any interaction with the outside world besides very specific people. Obviously, they did not have access to televisions or radios at the time. And even if they did, they'd be relegated to Guyanese broadcasts.
Yeah. And, you know, racism is very real, especially, you know, back then.
I mean, worse. Now too, but...
Well, yeah, but it was worse back then.
Oh,
so it's
for
like...
sure. He was taking advantage of the fact that his position on integration endeared him to a lot of people, and then using that to his advantage.
Yeah. and he was using, you have to know, like, your target, you have to know. So it's like, if these people are, like, whatever reason, like, reasonably, especially back then, afraid of racism and whatever may come with that, then you can just use that against them. You can be like, if you try to go back, they're going to do some super terrible racist shit against you.
Yeah, he was basically holding him there with fear.
Yeah.
Part of what I would consider his psychological abuse of his members is that he would frequently hold rehearsals for the end of day's drill.
Oh.
And their eventual demise. He wanted to do this so families were familiar with the drill when it was finally time.
Right.
So he wanted to make it easy peasy for his congregants. They'd all get to heaven super quick, which would most definitely not be fucking traumatizing.
Definitely not. Obviously.
So during these rehearsals, which I cannot imagine having to do, he would have the congregants repeatedly act out, first poisoning their children with a syringe, and then themselves. That was the protocol. He would tell them to line up, and everybody would be given a cup with a red liquid, or a cup and a syringe, however it needed to be done. He told the congregants that the poison would kill them in 45 minutes.
That's terrifying. Imagine having to live for 45 minutes after that.
They thought it was the time every time they did this.
Wait, they didn't know?
They didn't know until afterwards.
That's so fucked up. Like, even just like...
He would wait until everybody in the congregation had gone through this ritual and wait, and then tell them that nobody was going to die today.
So what, was he just giving them, like, something else in the meantime?
He was giving them their red flavor aid.
Wouldn't they taste the difference?
Not necessarily.
I mean, if they didn't...
They didn't know what they were looking for anyway.
Yeah.
Because...
Yeah, I guess it makes
normally
sense.
Not just taking shots of poison.
That's so fucked up, though.
Yeah.
Like, imagine having, like, going through that experience and thinking that you are going to be dead in an hour, and having to repeatedly, like, kill your kids every single time without even knowing that it wasn't real.
He called this a test of loyalty.
That's so fucked up.
Yeah, I would...
Also, like, they have no choice but to be loyal at that point.
It's absolutely monstrous, the thought of doing that to everybody. But I can't imagine acting that out over and over when you were small. I mean, there were larger kids there, but the larger kids were getting cups too.
Yeah, because at that point they'd be assumed to be responsible enough to do it on their own. Yeah. But, like, they have more autonomy, more will, like, free will, and they're being manipulated too.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, they're going to do it willingly because they think that's what they're going to have to do because that's, because their parents are telling them to do that, and their parents are an authority, and he's also an authority. So they really don't see another way, especially, some of these kids have probably been in it for years at that point.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. And speaking of family relationships, he frequently separated families.
Oh.
He was trying to break the inherent family bond that my head tells me as a parent should trump the whims of a psychotic preacher. But to that point, they didn't realize how psychotic he actually was. Also, they were brainwashed.
Yeah.
Romantic relationships and sex were frowned upon, except for Jim. Jim fucked everybody.
So, he can do whatever you want, but God forbid you fornicate? He can do it. He can do it with anybody he wants. Especially because, you know, they can't really truly consent. Because, of course, if this, like, God figure to you is just being like...
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna do it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you say no, like, God knows what he's gonna threaten you with, you know?
To make it even better, he made the whole congregation declare that they were gay. Everybody in the compound was gay. Every single one of them, except for Jim. Jim was the only straight man now. But was he really? Because he was literally fucking everybody.
Wait, he even made the women declare that they were gay?
Everybody was gay.
I mean, not really.
Nope, they were all gay. Except for him.
Because he said so.
Exactly.
But...
yeah.
No, fuck this guy, for real. So wait, what was
he was basically pandering to any minority group's fears to maintain control.
So wait, I mean, that's also asserting control over their identity.
That's part of his control.
And also, like, forcing people to give up their bodies to you, basically, is also asserting control over them. It's like...
Oh, absolutely.
Also, did he... to the kids, too?
There's no specific mention of that. I wouldn't be surprised if there were teenagers involved. Probably not small children, because he seemed like he felt he was super pious, but then again, you know...
I mean, I guess you can just never know.
There was obviously things that happened that even the general public was never made aware of.
Yeah.
And
that's...
yeah. So California Congressman Leo Ryan had been taking calls from many of the families from Jim Jones's flock. And he pretty quickly determined that something was not right, and he was going to investigate the claims against the church. He requested visitation to the compound, which, for obvious reasons, Jones was opposed to. He did deny requests for visitation multiple times until eventually giving in. Probably because his continued denials would warrant some sort of investigation. Yeah. By the local government, instead of just having some people fly over. He did eventually give in, and on November 14th, 1978, Congressman Ryan, a band of reporters and family members of Jones' followers, landed in the Guyana capital of Georgetown. Jones was the fantastic host. He did hold a reception for the delegations, but things grew pretty tense pretty quickly when it became clear that some of the congregation were looking for a way out. During Congressman Ryan's stay, a number of church members defected and were set to leave with Ryan on November 17th. While waiting on the airstrip to leave, because didn't have a straight airport.
Yeah, because small country.
Yeah, so they just had an airstrip near Jonestown. They were waiting there to leave. They had to get an extra plane for the amount of people they had with them. And members of the People's Temple had arrived in big trucks, like military style, ones with the open backs and stuff. They all had guns, and they opened fire.
Oh.
During the melee, Ryan and 4 others were killed. A number of people were injured. And some were able to get away. But given the nature of the murders, Jones knew that his time was short.
Yeah, because, I mean, your followers just killed people.
because they were no longer not causing trouble in Guyana.
Yeah.
So,
Like, that's an issue.
yeah, on November 18th, Guyanese troops were preparing to descend on the compound. And Jones knew this, so he set his final plan into motion. He mixed a giant vat of Flavor Aid, not actually Kool-Aid like we say, but Kool-Aid is the more popular thing. I don't even know if they make Flavor Aid anymore. I know they did when I was a kid.
Yeah, I've never seen Flavor Aid.
It was the same thing as Kool-Aid, cheaper. That's all I remember.
Yeah, I don't think they make that anymore because I've never heard of it. Sorry, am I making you feel old?
He mixed this giant batch of disgusting sugar water with cyanide, tranquilizer, and sedatives.
Just a whole concoction. Burr's making death potions.
He was making sure his plan worked.
He's making sure nobody would get out alive.
And per their previous rehearsals, syringes were used to dose the babies and children, followed by the adults. And at this point, it was probably extremely likely that his congregation thought this was just another rehearsal.
I mean, yeah, because they'd done it a ton of times, and every other time it was a rehearsal.
Until the babies started to die.
Well, I mean, yeah, they would die first, wouldn't they? Especially because it's being injected straight into them, and they're smaller, so it's not going to take as much for their bodies to give out.
They were doing it orally, so it wasn't... But still, they're a little
I thought you said they were injecting them.
with the syringe.
Oh, like
down the throat.
in the mouth. Oh,
yes.
Okay. To make sure they couldn't, like, spit it out.
Yes, like your brother took medicine up until about a year
ago. Okay. I thought they were just, like, injecting them in the arm or something.
No.
Okay.
Down the throat. It took days for the military to reach Jonestown, only to discover this horrifying scene. They later found that Jones had recorded the entire thing. You could hear the screams of dying children, confused and agonized parents who were wailing with grief when they realized that this really was going to happen.
I mean, it's just something, like, you should never have to experience.
No.
Like,
you could hear people walking around drugged and panicked, and you could hear Jones saying things like, "This is no way for us to die."
I'm so upset. Hold on.
You what?
I'm actually getting kind of sad. Hold up.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you cry.
No, but, like...
It's not, like, the whole thing is not okay. We'll do a serial killer next time.
That's easier on the psyche.
So, Jones was heard on the tape saying things like, "This is no way for us to die. We must die with dignity." He ended the recording by saying, "We didn't commit suicide. We committed an act of revolutionary suicide, protesting the conditions of an inhumane world." Basically, it was the petition at the end of Heathers. Go at it.
Yeah. But also, like, in your world that you were making wasn't inhumane?
He did not feel that it was.
But it's making parents kill their children and being like, "You guys are inhumane." Like,
yeah. In the search of the compound, they located over $500,000, which today would be roughly $2.3 million.
Oh, damn.
He had a cache of weapons and hundreds of passports locked away. They also found Jones dead of a gunshot wound to the head. We do not know if this was self-inflicted, like his idol Hitler, or if one of the followers took matters into their own hands when they realized what the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
I would like to think the latter, but I would.
I mean, he was obsessed with Hitler and how he killed himself to get out of, Yes. So.
They did find that some followers were able to escape by various means. Some members were in the Capitol on business. One family told other members that they were going on a picnic, and they walked 35 miles to the nearest city encampment.
It's a lot of miles.
And apparently, Jonestown had their own fucking basketball team.
They had a basketball team?
They were at an away game that day.
So,
yeah,
This is poorly planned.
Well, he wasn't expecting to have to kill a congressman.
Yeah, he wasn't expecting... Yeah, I guess. But, it took the... he also didn't know how long it would take for them to get out there. So, it was an urgent thing to him.
Yes, and he would rather take as many as he could down with him
than have his whole operation busted. And
there were other people and other stories. I think the most striking was her name was Cynth Thrash. She was a black elderly woman who was at the compound. She had become disillusioned with Jones. Mm-hmm. She wanted to leave, but she stayed because her sister was still a devout follower of Jones.
So she wanted to make sure her sister was okay.
She had either fallen asleep or passed out. They're not clear as to whether or not she actually drank the poison and just didn't ingest enough of it, or whether she was literally dead to the world. She probably did, I would think, take some of the Kool-Aid, because how are you going to sleep through that?
Yeah.
Without some sort of drugs in your system. She was in her cabin when she fell asleep / passed out. She woke up the next day by herself with over 900 bodies. The military arrived the very next day. She did return to the United States and lived out her life. Over 900 people died that day, a third of whom were babies and children. And statistically speaking, until September 11th, it held the distinction of holding the most amount of civilian casualties in a single non-natural event.
Jesus. Babies and children. Were some of these his children? His babies? Because,
one could assume so, yeah. I'm guessing they didn't have birth control there.
Yeah.
Because he actually was married. So, but he was still hitting it pretty hard. He was living the single life.
Yeah, and yeah, no. Because getting a woman pregnant and forcing her to have your child, that's also exercising control over somebody, and if your kid's born into it and you're the kid's father, they'll be more likely to stay.
Yeah.
So it's just another form of manipulation. Just piles, layers and layers.
So that is the devastating story behind the phrase, "Don't drink the Kool-Aid."
Devastating is right. Okay.
So we're going to wrap this up before anybody starts crying again. Please feel free to follow us on Facebook or Instagram You could email us at sinisterstudiespod@gmail.com.
And especially since you tag us in posts, you tag yourself in posts.
Yes, true.
Yeah.
We'll edit that out.
Yep. Okay, yeah. Whatever you're listening on, whatever that rating system is, rate us, mayhaps.
Follow us. Thank you for your patience with us while we were getting this off the ground.
Yeah.
In our slew of technical difficulties.
Yeah, no, truly, we filmed, not really filmed, we've recorded numerous episodes so far. We've re-recorded numerous episodes so far. We're going to have to re-record another one. Some of them are currently being edited. Those may be out before this one. Likely be out before this one, so...
It will be out before this one.
Okay, well, this is peer pressure, guys. Yeah. So...
Pippi looks pretty anxious about the status of her dinner, so we're gonna go feed that fat bitch.
Feed the fat bitch. Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Adios.